Hi, I'm Tim Elmore. I'm the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders. And today on the show, we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk about the fact that diversity goes beyond ethnic, gender, and income diversity. The new kind of diversity is generational diversity. Today's workforce has 4 to 5 generations working together. Secondly, we're going to reveal why it's important to go beyond just tolerating other generations and really talk about leveraging those generations for the good of the mission of the organization. And lastly, I'm going to offer you some strategies for connecting with the various generations around you, both upward and downward, so you can get the very most out of each one.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Whether you are a member of a multi-generational family business, a leader in a growing organization, you are no doubt aware, maybe even frustrated by the conflicting demands of today's workplace. Trying to work out what people want in order to come on board and to stay on board and be engaged is no longer a one-size-fits-all. Oh, we'll pay the most and they'll just stick around. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. This can, of course, be not only confusing, but it can leave leaders throwing up their hands in frustration. Leadership today seems to be pretty much in a state of paradox. There is this works, but it doesn't work. Or that works, but it doesn't work. Is there an answer? Or is it the blind leading the blind? Well, stay tuned because over the next 2 episodes, we're going to sit down once again with Dr. Tim Elmore, author of more than 35 books and CEO of Growing Leaders. More about that in a moment. As always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please do us a favor. We really appreciate it. It makes a big difference. Go on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, I know you're curious. My name is Dov Baron. I'm your host, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Today's workforce is unique in our history in that for the first time, maybe ever, there's 4, sometimes 5 generations working side by side. And the result can be frustrating, it can be confusing, it gets really sort of mixed up. But have we even bothered to stop and ask ourselves, what are the stories we're telling ourselves, through some psychological bias? What are the stories we're telling ourselves about those other generations? Well, our guest for the next 2 episodes is Dr. Tim Elmore. Tim is the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. His work grew out of 20 years of serving alongside John Maxwell. However, Tim himself has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, USA Today, Psychology Today. He's been featured on CNN headlines, news, Fox and Friends, to talk about leading multiple generations in the marketplace. The man is I'll leave out the expletive that I said earlier before we started recording, but the man is a machine in that he's written over 35 books. Dr. Tim Elmore has spoken to over 500,000 leaders in business, universities, athletic teams, nonprofit organizations, and businesses including the Home Depot, Coca-Cola, American Eagle, Chick-Fil-A, the San Francisco Giants, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ohio State University, Stanford University, and the University of Alabama Athletics. So, guys got a bit of an idea. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome returning heavyweight champion of Next Generation Leadership, Dr. Tim Elmore.
You are so entertaining, Dad. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that you appreciate it. That's good. So before we jump in, I want to start off with this question because I talked about at the beginning that, my stuff is all around meaning. And I think that meaning is what drives, I believe that what drives human beings is meaning. When we look at where you're going to go in this particular podcast, in this subject around the diversity, the new diversity of multiple generations, what is the origin story of what gives your life meaning in that context?
Wow. Yeah.
There's a little light question to start us off.
Thanks for throwing me a softball there.
Exactly.
I think the answer accurately would be, as we do partner with so many organizations and universities, and we see multiple generations, I see people defaulting to putting up walls instead of bridges between generations. Ageism is a thing. Chronocentrism is a thing, where we just kind of get with our people that are all 42 years old or all 62 years old or all 22 years old. We hang around like-minded people. Mm-hmm. But then you and I both saw, Dov, I'm sure over the last few years on social media, there was hashtag how to confuse the millennial, where the boomers were making fun of those millennials that didn't seem to understand the workplace. Mm-hmm. But then the millennials fought back with, okay, boomer, that was a huge thing. Yeah. And then Gen Z got involved making fun of Gen Xers with okay, Karen. And Karen is that fictitious person who's always asking for the manager at the restaurant, always pestering the principal at the high school, just funny things. Now, that's all in fun, but we all realized this is a thing. There are different mindsets that are in a workplace. And unless we build bridges and find ways to leverage the strength of each one, we're not going to get where we need to go. In fact, one last thought. As I talk to CEOs, I hear most of them say, oh, I thought we were just supposed to tolerate each other or put up with each other, endure it. Oh my gosh, it's so much more. And I think if we could leverage those Gen Z young team members, those millennial team members, Gen X, oh my gosh, this could be amazing. That's what we're after.
Yeah, so let's think about this in the context of meaning and how all human beings are driven to belong. We are tribal.
Yeah.
And tribalism, I've had many people on the show. We've talked about diversity and we think about tribalism as being black, white, left, right, those kinds of things. Man United, Man City, Dallas Cowboys versus whoever is on the other, I don't know. But what you talk about in this book quite profoundly, and this is the book, by the way, folks, what you speak about quite profoundly is the tribalism that is played out in these generational ideas, and how it creates biases that may not be there. You can't look at every Gen Xer and go, well, they're all Karens.
Right.
Maybe there are some, but just to be clear, my second youngest grandchild is 12, and her nickname at school has become Karen because she's always complaining. It's not a good thing. It's not helping her with her childhood or her social skills, but she's, she moans a lot. She complains a lot. So she's a Gen Z Karen. So and it's just an example to show these traits that we sort of slap on a generation are our own bias.
Yeah, no doubt about it. In fact, I quickly say in the book, the goal is not to stereotype, but to understand.
Right.
And in the same way that we have realized, oh my gosh, ethnic diversity is a thing, gender diversity is a thing, income diversity is a thing. I think this is just as much. And all I'm asking for people to do is to put the work in that they need to put in to connect with that younger or older generation that we would with someone from another country or another ethnicity. We know we got to work harder and it's worth it. That's what I'm saying here.
And I fully agree with you, but I want to push back from the other side.
Okay.
And the pushback is this. Jesus, guy, you want me to do more work? It's bad enough I'm now trying to work out if it's he, she, they, it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to offend people with stereotypes that are nationality or ethnicity based. And now I've got to do this as well. Many leaders I'm talking to are saying, I am just exhausted.
Yes.
And on top of that, I'm supposed to be deeply relational. I'm supposed to have relationships with these people. I used to be able to go to work with my agenda to get stuff done and tell them what to get done. And that was the end of it. I made these big decisions around my vision. Now I've got to learn all. It just feels too much. How do you confront that, Tim?
A couple of thoughts real quick. First of all, I think it's important we all remember that technical skills on a job depreciate, but social skills appreciate, but we don't act like it. So isn't it true? You learn a skill on a job 10 years from now, that skill is obsolete now. It's
Completely.
antiquated. But interpersonal skills, the emotional intelligence it requires to connect with someone unlike me is so helpful as we go forward. So let me tell a quick story. Early in the book, I tell this story to answer that very question, Dov. Tony was a student at Ohio University just a couple of years ago, and he had a part-time job. He worked at Sherwin-Williams Paint Store, and he was doing part-time shifts. But after a shift, he would mix paint colors together just on his own time and take pictures. He would mix blueberries and white paint and create this vivid color blue or whatever, those kinds of things. He started a TikTok account, started posting his videos there. He got 1.4 million followers, 37 million views. But 1.4 million followers made him think, wait a minute, we could use this for marketing. We could monetize this. So he put a slide deck together to take to management, to the executives at Sherwin-Williams. He did not get one leader interested. He did not get one set of eyeballs to look at his slide deck. Tony did get something he didn't expect. He got fired.
What?
They let him go. Yep. They let him go because they were sure he was doing this on company time, or he was probably disrupting the customers, or probably stealing the paint. You know how those young whippersnappers are. We had the stereotypes.
Yeah.
And so Tony was let go. Get this. He left Sherwin-Williams. He's down in Florida now with 2 million followers, and he has his own paint store. He started his own paint store. Now, there's many parts to that story we probably don't understand. But one thing I know for sure, they missed an opportunity. So yeah, it was more work to say, I got to connect with this 20-year-old young guy. But boy, it would have been worth it to get new ideas, fresh ideas brought in. So that would be one answer I would make. The second answer I would make is data shows that diversity, whether it's generational or ethnicity, just pays off in the long run. The meetings are tougher. They're more friction maybe, but in the end, we produce more. We better connect. We better relate to all kinds of customers. Think about it. Don't you want to sell your product, listener, to all Absolutely you do. Yeah. So I'll stop there, but I have to talk myself into it too. I'm 62 years old. I'm tired. I don't want to have to look after that young whippersnapper, but I know that's what's in my best interest and their best interest.
So what's a strategy, as people listening in right now, what's a simple strategy that can get us on that path while we're still feeling bloody exhausted about having to work out the next thing we're supposed to work out?
Yeah. A couple of things that are very doable tomorrow or today. One is a little exercise I talk about in the book called Ditch the Niche. So we do hang out in niches or niches. Like I said, chronocentrism. We are in our chronology of life, and we like to find people our age that vote the same way, same views, same values. I think it's wise for me to seek out at my age a 23-year-old. For instance, we have a 23-year-old on our team. I love going to lunch with Cam because Cam is so different. And oh my gosh, I end up learning something. From him every single time. So ditch the niche, meet with a younger or older generation, whoever you are, someone not like you, and then ask them about their superpowers. What do they know or do that they just say, this is a superpower? And most of the time, Dov, it's not what I've got. I'm an old dinosaur here, So that would be one. Another one, I would say this to leaders. I'm seeing more and more young team members come on board a team, and they bring expectations with them, as you mentioned in the introduction, all kinds of expectations. We need to get them on the table. I believe conflict arises, or conflict, I should say, expands based on the distance between expectation and reality.
Yes.
So, yes, doesn't it? So I would say talk about communication norms right up front. This is how we best communicate here. I know you love text message. I know you love Instagram. Here, this is how. So please use this language. Number two, talk about decision-making rights and norms. I think, we've had at our office some 20-somethings that thought when they got to a meeting, they had decision-making rights because they were in the meeting. No. You don't have the rights. So as silly as that sounds to people like you and I, Dov, we've got to talk about stuff that maybe seems obvious. And then we start gaslighting young team members because they're not caught up with what needs to happen. I think we need to lean in and step up instead of step back, and we need to get this right. That would be my initial thoughts on that.
Those are great, because one of the things in my company, we also run a speaker training. And in the speaker training, one of the things we talk about is assumptive knowledge. And assumptive knowledge is where you speak about something with the assumption that the audience knows it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that this happens all the time in organizations, that you just assume they know. Well, it was in the folder they got when they arrived.
Yes.
Did you read it? Because they didn't, I guarantee you. Well, we put it on the app. Yeah, they're not interested. You put it on an app because you thought the app was cool, but they're still not going to read it, right? Yeah. You did a little video. Yeah, but it was boring, so they ditched it. So this is the thing, is the assumptive knowledge about getting things really clear that we take for granted. I think it's such an important point there, Tim. And as you said, the other piece around that I want to sort of circle back to here, which we were talking about before those strategies, which was, you and I both know this because we do so much leadership training. Skills are highly valued, and yet they're evaporating every single day. They're just going to disappear.
Yeah.
The social skills are so much more useful and ongoing and build. They just keep building.
Yeah.
Yet corporations don't value that. Corporations say, we want you to come in with these skills, and we're not even going to bother to train you in the social side, because we want to upgrade your technical skills. We want to help you with your technical skills, but we're not going to give you your social skills. And now we've got this, what you called in the book, generational ghettos. Because nobody's learned how to get out of their generational ghetto, their peer ghetto of being around their own groups. How do you confront that when you're brought in, and that, because I know they're bringing you in because they've probably got a little bit of what we call sechel. They've got a little more brains around understanding that they do need that. But that biases, particularly from our generation, is still there.
Yes, no doubt about it. I was just with a company. I'm going to have them remain nameless because I'm going to share some not so good stuff first.
Right.
They just were having a hard time with the 20-somethings. So freshly graduated, and they just were not connecting. And I'm telling you, they were beyond frustrated. They were angry and thinking about, should we just let them all go and wait for the alpha generation coming after Gen Z? So I have a chapter in the book called how to compromise without giving in. And I really talk specifically about they're going to bring in a set of values, perhaps, just like, let's just say this is good for imagination. Just like if we visited another country, let's say in Asia, we would know going into that country, wow, I better get ready. They may speak a different language here, have different customs here, different values. Absolutely. So that 20-something might have different values. So I psych myself to work harder. This story is brilliant. Maggie was the hiring manager. Antonio was a brand new hire that she brought in. He had a good interview and he came in. One of the policies the company had was no tattoos or nose or facial piercings.
Yep.
Now, I know that people would disagree with that, but for this brand, they said, we think that's off-putting to customers.
Right.
Well, Antonio gets hired. It's not till 3 or 4 weeks in that he's wearing a short sleeve shirt and Maggie can see the tattoos. She's not so mad at the tattoo as the fact that he wasn't honest about this. So she calls him to the office. They have this little come to Jesus meeting and it's not a pretty sight. But she gently says, why didn't you tell me? You know we don't allow tattoos. Well, he thinks she's questioning his identity because those tattoos are so much a part of his identity. Well, she's not, but that's how he takes it. So here's a clash now. Mm-hmm. Well, they have 3 meetings, Dov, and it doesn't really go too well at all 3 meetings. Maggie realizes I'm at an impasse. I either need to let him go because everybody else knows there's this policy, and if I let him stay, they go, seriously, But he's a good worker. She recognized Antonio was a good worker. So here's what she did that I thought was such a great way to compromise it without giving in. She met with him one-on-one again, 4th time, and said, Antonio, you know about this policy, but I don't want to lose you. You and I both need to get in front of this entire team, and we both need to apologize. And we need to talk about this. And so here was her answer. You're going to cover that tattoo. You're going to wear long sleeve shirts and cover that tattoo when you're on your ship. Now, you got it off duty, but this is how you're going to do it. But you need to apologize that you were not honest with me because they all were in the interview process. It was a beautiful meeting, a tearful emotional meeting where they cheered at the end because they didn't want to lose this young teammate. But yet Maggie had to be the leader. She couldn't just say, whatever. And by the way, one last thing. I love the fact that Maggie called corporate and said, could we rethink this policy maybe in the future? Isn't that brilliant? That was soft skills. That was emotional intelligence. And going forward, I think they're in great shape. So anyway.
But that's a very interesting thing because, when I read the book, right, this new diversity, it was really, for me, very much about understanding generations as nations, as ethnicities.
Yes.
In my work, we talk about emotional source code, and we talk about in that stack, the identity is the number one thing. That people, if you threaten their identity, they will come at you hard. Yeah. And you may not understand that identity. Yeah. You may not agree with that identity. You may harshly judge that identity, but you will never change anybody out of an identity with brute force. A story I've told on here before, but it's part of my my book on emotional source code. Tony came into my office with his head down in shame and finally spit out that he'd been a neo-Nazi.
Wow.
And he wanted help. And when he and I ended up many years later speaking at the UN about the de-radicalization of the far right.
Yeah.
And the person who was heading the panel said to me, how could you possibly assist this person who fought to eradicate you, because I'm Jewish, you and your people off the planet?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, because you saw an identity and you thought that was him. The identity is not the person, but
Yeah.
if I'd have attacked the identity, it would have failed. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I never touched the identity. I just understood that's not who he is. That's an identity that he's attached to. And I'm not going to try and undermine it in any way, but I'm going to find out where we have commonality. And she said, well, how did you do that? What was the magic language around de-radicalization? And I said, Monty Python. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, we talked about the parrot sketch.
Yes.
Found the commonality in that did not challenge the identity, but found a common ground, as you said, a bridge, not a wall, between us. And as a result, that man now is the head of the Cure for Hate, and he travels the world speaking in Holocaust museums and synagogues about his behavior and what the movement was about and why people are identified with it as opposed to being who they are. And so if we approach this from that same understanding that this Gen Z or this millennial or whatever it is, or even us boomers, we're identified, but that's not who we are.
That's right.
I'm a boomer. I'm identified as that because that's my age, but it's not who I am, not by any stroke of the imagination.
Yes.
And so if I can understand that about myself, then I can begin to understand that about you, that you may look like a millennial, you may fall into the category of a millennial, but I actually know many millennials who are more boomer than I am.
Yeah, sure. I do too. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. So if we start looking at that, looking for what's similar rather than what's different, but still recognizing what's different and respecting that, because that's, for me, that's what I felt was so much of the message of the book was like, can I respect this? And I'm going to use the term age ethnicity.
Yeah.
Can I respect this age ethnicity, not disrespect it, not put it down, but look for what is the gifts it's offering me?
Yeah.
Is that a fair comment?
That's a great comment. And that's exactly the goal of the book. In fact, I do talk about the fact when we stereotype, stereotypes are shortcuts of the mind.
Yes.
We just take shortcuts. It's not even fair. And it's because we don't want to do the work. That's when we do shortcuts, right? We don't want to do the work. And so we say dumb things like all baby boomers are stubborn, or all Gen Xers are skeptical, or all millennials are narcissistic, or all Gen Zers are fragile snowflakes. Haven't we heard all of those terms?
Absolutely.
But you and I both, that is not true. Some might be, but when we go deeper rather than, do the stereotype, we find out, oh my gosh, baby boomers have stories to tell and coaching to offer. Xers have this contrarian point of view that's so necessary. Millennials have energy and confidence. Gen Zer has this hacker mindset and this entrepreneurial spirit. Think about if we could leverage this instead of putting it off, we would put ourselves on that proverbial next level.
That's a great place for us to finish the first part of the episode. And I know that there's a test on your website where people can go test the generational EQ. But before I go to that, and before I give you a chance to tell people about where they can go find out that, I'm no doubt that you look at the data of that. Is there a generation that does better at it than other generations? Or are they all sort of about the same? Meaning their understanding of the other generations. So do boomers understand the other generations better, or do Xers, or do millennials, or do Gen Zs? Because I have a guess, and I really want.
Okay. Well, I'll just share with you the data we've gathered from those who've taken the GQ. We call it the GQ, the generational quotient. We thought that was kind of funny. Yeah. So we have found that so far, leading the pack slightly is Gen X. But that makes sense. They're in the middle of the pack. We've got millennials behind them, boomers ahead of them. They've always been this middle ground trying to understand the younger and the older. So that would be, was that what you were going to guess?
It was
Doc?
exactly what I was going to guess, that the people who would do best of it would be the middle child.
Yeah. Yes.
Because they had
that's
to
right.
live with these oppressive older children who were us, who were boomers, and they've also had to look after their younger siblings who are the millennials and Gen Zs. So
Very
I figured they would be a little smarter at it, if only by experience, not necessarily liking it more, but more understanding of it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Spot on. Yeah.
Tim, this has been a fabulous first part of the conversation, again, as always. So please make sure that people know where they can find out more about you. We're going to be back for part 2 of this delicious conversation, of course. But I want to make sure that people can know where to find out more about you, about this wonderful book, and how people can get a hold of it.
Absolutely. So I want to take you to the free assessment. This is absolutely free, and we call it the GQ. So typically I'd hold up a QR code. I don't have it in front of me, but let me just send you to a site. It's simply newdiversitybook.com. newdiversitybook.com, and that will take you to where you can take the assessment. You can certainly get the book there as well with a bunch of bonus content, but we think it might be fun for you, listener, just to find out how fluent you are reading the different generations. And then, of course, I try to offer a game plan, also free, that you can go through and begin to connect with the different generations.
Yeah. So as I said, it's a great book. I highly recommend it, and I recommend that you go through the test. You might be surprised at your results. Listen, I went through it, and I didn't do as well as I thought I would do. So, and I think I'm pretty up there, but you know what? I got my ass kicked. It was important so it's important for you to go test yourself on there. All right, we're going to be back for part 2 of this delicious conversation with Tim Elmore. Until then, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about your generational emotional intelligence, how you are dealing with the other generations, how you can get way better at it, and understand that it's not just about understanding them, but they have gifts to offer. Every generation has a gift. We'll see you in part 2 of this delicious conversation. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.